we happened to see Bertha, tell her Bob will be along. He's still talking. So make sure before you leave today that you try to find a little second to ask Bob for one of those cards, because it's priceless and it's the truth. Just saw Bertha just about a week ago, and she was sitting in the car, and I looked in and I said, Bertha, he's up there talking, but honestly, I think he's coming pretty soon. She goes, I know. So Bertha deserves a big round of applause and a lot of indebtedness, because she is one patient woman. So Bertha, raise your hand, and we'd like to give you a We've enjoyed working with Bob and Bertha so much. Well, we've been able to put several things together for the historical group, and Bob is full of information, not only about what it is that's happened on his end of the world, down near Sheds and DeRuyter and Woodstock, but most especially throughout his life in the beginning stages of his early years in teaching. And this school system has been indebted to his service, and more importantly, those students that he was able to get something through their heads to. Those boys, those men and women have been the product of what you see in a real working person who has not only patience and dedication, but they know the trade which Bob taught them. So it's our pleasure to bring Bob to you this afternoon, and I know that you're going to not only learn something, but enjoy what he has to share with us. Bob Ossont.
Thank you. I'm not used to using a microphone because I had a voice that could override all the machines and the welders and everything in the shop to speak to the boys, so I don't know just how well you're hearing me with this microphone. So I think that before I start to tell you any stories, of which I'm loaded with, I should say that Charlie Shea has already warned me that if I don't tell the truth, that he's going to call me a liar. So he is the next older fellow that's here. I'm sure I'm the oldest one here. I'm 88 years old, born in 1915. So I'm very thankful in this world to have lived this number of years. I have two brothers, two sisters. We're all in our 80s and all operating in pretty good shape. So to wonder where we came from. During the war, I had an occasion to run across a man from France when he says, where is Mr. Ossont? But how do you call me that name? Because I'm in France and I know that French name. So my grandfather and grandmother that lived where I live now were born in France, Alsace-Lorraine. They could speak 3 languages because they lived on the border to Germany and France. So that's a little history of where I come from. I could tell you some other stories, but I have some other stories that I've listed that I want to tell. And I better be pretty truthful, because when I look back here, here's at least 15 or 20 of my former students sitting here, and they're wondering what I'm going to say about them. So the first thing I should say, that in this room is just a wonderful, beautiful building. And to think that this all came out of centralized schools. Seeing what I saw of the old district school, in my notes here, I went the first 7 grades to a one-room school. You know what that means? You saw the first grade 7 times, the second grade 6 times, and so on. I can quote you the first 2 pages of the new education reader that they had in the school system at that time. Apple and it is, the first page. Second page, can Fanny Fan Dan. Fanny can Fan Dan. Those were the first 2 pages of the New Education Reader. So I spent my first 7, and there were 21 kids in 8 grades in that one-room school between Ryder and Lincoln, if you know where Lincoln is. And I have many pictures of the students, and I can name every student that was going to school at that time in the little district school called the Red House School between Ryder and Lincoln. So I want to thank the girls here and Jim and so on. Think of the work they went through when they came over to my house and picked up the yearbooks that I have from 1947 to 1980. I run upstairs at least twice a week to grab a yearbook, to find out who this was, what his name was, or forgot this name, and so on. Those yearbooks are all on display out there. Also, the senior trips that I went on. So, what I thought I would do would just give you a little bit of a history of my life before I got into it. I don't know why it was. I was born with an engine in my head, because when I was 3 years old, I was car crazy. When I was 5, I could start the Model T Ford and back it out of the garage. When I was 7, I was on the road driving a 1915 Model T Ford that my father bought the year I was born for $310. And from that day on, I've been car crazy. I wanted to be a grease monkey mechanic. But, now when I tell you this, my family did not like that at all. In 3 generations, there were 40 teachers in my family. I had to go to school with my father and mother both, in a district school. So my father was not very happy about my wanting to run around with an automobile, and I had 7 old vehicles that burned up in 1934, the year I graduated from high school. It just about devastated me. So I started over again. I said, I'll have to start over again. So the Ryder School had an academy there, so when we centralized in 1929, we had buses. Before that, how did you get to school? We lived only a half a mile from the Red Schoolhouse, so we walked the first 7 grades to that school and back. We centralized in 1929, and we had buses. But we didn't build a new school and have it until 1937. I graduated in 1934 from Ryder School. 3rd from the bottom of the class because I did not like school. I was a rebel in my family. I didn't like having to study all the time. I'd rather be out playing with a car. So I got through high school anyway. And I said, I want to be a mechanic. Well, my father says, you're going to mechanic school then. Morrisville. 1934, fall of 34, graduated in 36. Between 35 and 36, we were supposed to be employed. I went to work for Chevrolet, and Allenwood Chevrolet in Ryder. And I graduated, and immediately, again, education, school. General Motors says, if you're going to work for us, you must go to school. I graduated from General Motors schools, and it was unbelievable what you had to learn. Every single part. In 1935, 36, 37, 38, 39, I knew every part of a Chevrolet. I could memorize it, every detail. I knew a Model T Ford, because I owned probably 10 Model T Fords. I took them apart and memorized them. And the boys who kidded me always would say, you were all right till you got into Chevrolets. What was that? What happened? Well, General Motors indoctrinates you. When you go to school with them, you're indoctrinated to believe in General Motors. So that's what I did. Now, how did I get to teaching? I didn't want to be a teacher. My father worked 21 years in the Ryder Bank. I'm working in Allen Woods. He walked up by there to pick up the mail for the bank. He stopped in at least twice a week. For 4 years and 7 months, I worked there. Do you want to be a grease monkey and work under this lift the rest of your life? I said, I enjoy this. You've got to quit this and go back to school. You just can't be here. Because teachers are the only thing in this family. I've got 2 daughters. One of them just retired 2 years ago from Skinny out of school after 34 years. The other one, she was teaching in Chicago for 3 or 4 years while her husband got through. She passed away 11 years ago with leukemia. She was a teacher, a very good teacher. So the two things that happened to me that took me down was losing my wife in '83, losing my daughter 11 years ago. But you must pick up when a sad thing happens to you and continue to live. You gave Bertha a good hand. I have to tell you what this little joke is. I had her 2 brothers through 4 years of school. And Eddie was the baby of the family of 4 girls and 3 boys. He was a baby. I had problems with him. So, if I'd only known that she had so many of the characteristics of those 2 brothers, I'd probably never married her. And she takes to jokes real good. Well, I'll tell you a little bit about, I was born on a farm over in a place called Mariposa. And my grandfather and grandmother left the farm with my father, with a 300-acre farm and 100 cows. So we had to move, and we moved down on a Lakeland Road when I was 4 years old on a 20-cow farm. The old building still stands, but they're completely depleted. And so I lived there for 4 years until I was 1920, when I was 22 years old, and got married. And I was working in Allenwood Chevrolet at 30 cents an hour, $12 a week, big pay. There were 14 employees in that Allenwood Chevrolet at that time. So when my father kept begging me, I was married, and we were expecting a child. And he hounded me so bad, I gave in. He said, I'll send you down to Cornell, and I'll pay it all if you'll just do that and go. So I gave up and went down to Cornell. Now, after having graduated from Morrisville, 2 years, going through General Motors School for 4 years and 7 months, because they sent me every little while, I had a real problem with some of the professors. What are you doing here if you can do this? Professor, I need that piece of paper that makes me eligible to teach school to satisfy my father and mother. So that was the problem that I had. So I went down there. Believe it or not, I found out that I could learn something, because in Cornell you better study or you were out. 500 boys broke out the year I was there, freshman. 500 broke out. The auditoriums were larger than this. Gas engine Riley found out about me, and he took a liking to me. So Professor Robb and Reddy, there's a building named after them. Professor Robb did not like me. And he said, now you boy, I was 25 years old now. The other boys in my class were 18. Susan Roebuck gave Cornell University 10 economy Susan Roebuck hit and miss gas engines, if some of you people know what those were. I knew that engine. We had one on our back porch that run our washing machine, and I knew every detail of that engine. So the lab was to be 2 full weeks, Tuesdays and Thursday afternoon. The engines were completely demolished and taken apart and laid out there in a book that told us how to put it together. I said to this boy from Sherburne, he was 18, I was 25, I can put this together in an hour. Really? We put it together in an hour. I said, I'm not going to go up and tell Professor Robb. So he went up and told him, Professor Rod, come down and what in time are you doing here if you can put an engine together that quick? The other boys didn't even have it started. They were just looking for the timing marks and so on. I put it together. Don't you ever speak to me again. You speak to my assistant from now on. That was the best thing that ever happened to me, I'll tell you. Because I went up that lab. 1939, this assistant had an engine running on hydrogen. 1939, they knew how to do this. And he taught me more things. You cannot believe the things that fellow showed me. So sometimes things that look real bad, they will look good in the end. So here I am down there going to school, and my brother is graduating from Cornell, who became an agriculture teacher, and my younger brother was a sophomore in Syracuse University. So I come back in May from Cornell and went back to work for Ellenwood Chevrolet at 5 cents an hour increase, 35 cents. That brought me above $12 a week to about $14, $15 a week. And my brother said, you've got a car. I had a 34 Chevrolet that I paid $250 for. Will you take me to get a job? Now, he just graduated from Cornell. I said, sure, we'll go. While we were going through high school, we happened to have Mr. Sutliff as our teacher. He became the chief of the Bureau of Agricultural Education, so did we ever have it made as far as jobs of teaching in agriculture? Because he was our agriculture teacher for 4 years in graduate school, then he became the chief. So my brother said, we've got to go down to Albany and see him, but on the way I want to stop at a little place called Hartwick Seminary and see about a job there. So we went, stopped in there. My younger brother and I, he went into the main office to be interviewed. We walked up to the shop. Now this was something that I would have to stop now and tell you the story about this. This was a government school being run by the federal government because the state had no money to run a school to train boys. I'll get into this part of it in a few minutes. So in this shop, there were 12 boys. That was one half of the crew. They were all sitting around in a circle. And there was a corn planter with a John Deere backed up to the door. I said, what's going on, fellows? We can't do anything. We're broke down. Well, why don't you fix it? You've got a welder here. The welder doesn't work. Why doesn't it? Well, we've been having some repairs on the electric and the box. Something's wrong, it just throws the circuit. You'll mind if I look at it? I walked over. They had the hot wire on the ground in the main circuit box. You want me to change it? I changed it. Now, I suppose you can weld. Yes, I can. Would you weld up these wheels? I welded up the wheels. We went on to Albany to see the chief of Bureau of Agricultural Education. Came back, I went back down in the woods to work. 4 days later, a man from the federal government walked in and says, are you the fellow that welded up the wheels down at Hartwick Seminary, the government school? Yes, I am. Would you like a job teaching there? I'm not certified, I can teach. The government doesn't require any certification whatsoever to teach. Would you come down? Anybody that could do what you did for us the other day, that was it. That was my first teaching job. So I took the job there, a 500-acre farm with everything you could imagine. Can you believe I walked into a classroom, I didn't know a thing about teaching, with 20 boys sitting there. I found out later, every single one of those boys had served time in jail. A pretty sad thing. Now, just for a little comparison, Tommy Martin, who got to be the head of the Janesville Penitentiary, called me up sometime right here in Katie's school. Bob, I have 11 boys here that say they've been in your classes and they're in jail. what can we do for them? Now there's a comparison. Those boys quit school in the school system because they couldn't do anything, only the shop work, and they were in trouble. So here I am on this 500-acre farm, teaching boys from New York City who'd never seen a cow. We had, you name it, on a farm. We had hogs, poultry, pasteurizing plant, about 50 milking cows. And I was teaching. You had to teach them 2 to 3 hours a day, and the rest of the time they worked in the field. So this was, now I want to explain what this program was. The country at that time had got in such bad shape. This was after the crash of the big boys wiping out the stock market, which they found another way to do it now. But there was no money for schools. So what is going to be done? Well, here I am in this school, and the head, Mr. Herman Heggie, who's still alive and lives in, he's 90-some years old in Florida, said, we're inviting Eleanor Roosevelt, who originated this program, to come here to our school. So be prepared. I was laying cement floor down in one of the buildings at that time. I got appointed to show Eleanor Roosevelt, the First Lady, around the 500-acre farm. I was seated across from her to eat lunch. Everything except the sugar, the salt, and pepper was raised on that farm. Mrs. Roosevelt, how did this all start? Well, Robert, I'll tell you. You can't believe this. They were having riots in every city of young people, just like we had in Syracuse at this time. And they were killing people. The president said, go down to New York City and see what you find out. 1,000 boys were walking the street behind her. She said, what is it you kids want? We can't do anything. We don't know how to do anything. So they were breaking into everything. As I told you, every boy I had, I asked the boys what kind of trouble they got in. This one boy, I said, what did you, you're a real bright boy. Walking down the street one night, says, I had a drink in a soft drink. I went to hit this door handle of this door. I missed, broke the glass. In 10 minutes, I was in jail. That's what was happening. So I said, Mrs. Roosevelt, how did this all start? After New York City, Franklin said, you've got to go more. So she went, just to name a few, New Orleans, Los Angeles, Seattle, Chicago. The same thing was happening. You will have to appear, she said, Robert, I was scared to death to appear before the Joint House Committee and tell them the situation in our country. So I did, and they appropriated millions of dollars. But this was a real shocker to the education system of every state in the Union, because there was an NYA, maybe you saw it, a nice plaque out there that the boys made, NYA. Now this was under, now Franklin D. Roosevelt had to do something because the country was in such bad shape. So he called the National Recovery Act, NRA. Under that was the WPA, Work Projects Administration. Under that was the CCC, Civilian Conservation Corps, which set out trees. Men from families went and got in this so they didn't have to eat at home. You were paid $1 a day and furnished all the clothes you wore. Now along came, what are we going to do for the kids? National Youth Administration. Under that, you name an occupation, the government would set up a program and teach you that occupation. So when they found out in Hardwick Seminary, which is halfway between Cooperstown and Oneonta, I played a little baseball down in Cooperstown with my group of boys. We went down and played the Baseball Hall of Fame because we were 5 miles from Cooperstown. So to start with, you'd say that, what must the education people think? When they found out that I could weld, which I'd learned from General Motors schools, we're taking you off the farm, buddy. You're not. They moved me into the big training center in the city of Auburn because I was auto mechanic and I was welding. I switched back and forth between those two things in that place. They had foundry, they had drop forge, they had machine shop, they had 3 auto techs, auto body. You can't believe the stuff. Every teacher was not certified in that place. They were teaching boys. The war came on. Things really changed. Now here's a program going full steam. I got acquainted by going to meetings with Dr. Hetherington, the head of Auburn City Schools. I'm teaching in a classroom. Dr. Hetherington came to the door and knocked. Bob, you know you're illegal? I said, what's the matter, Dr. Hetherington? He says, you're not certified and you're teaching in a classroom. Oh, if I was over in the shop where all the noise is, and it has the chairs set up where the kids couldn't hear me, I'd be legal. Yes, you'd be legal, but you're not there. And he said, I'm pulling your leg, Bob. I'm going to give you a temporary certificate, and you're going to teach for the city of Auburn, and you'll stay right here. But he says, you don't know the rest of what this story is. I have just come back from Washington, D.C., where all the heads of the state education departments of the United States met and jumped all over the people that formed NYA. What are you doing in education? That is for the state education departments to do. He says, so now you're going to be teaching on a temporary certificate for this to still be here. 1 year later, NYA was done away with because of the situation in the country. I was the only one left of the NYA teachers because I had 3 daughters and I had been called 5 times to be, and they wouldn't take me because I had too many kids. So I was left in charge of the NYA Center, which was an enormous place. And the Army came in and moved in. They made me an instructor for the Army. I saw 100 boys on Monday, 100 boys Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. 500 boys I saw each week. I was teaching them basics of engineering. I could have gone with this group of boys and been made a first lieutenant without having to take basic training. They took to me so much. When they moved and went to England, I said, I can't do that. I immediately had a job with Curtiss Aircraft in the experimental engineering department. I got my notice to be drafted. This time, plan on having your wife pick up your car, because when you come down to Cooperstown, you'll get on a bus and you'll ride to Albany and take your physical, and you'll go from there to Fort Dix. So plan on. So they didn't know what was going to happen. When I got there, when those doctors found out I had 3 daughters, get back and go to work somewhere. We're never going to draft you. Then I started teaching in high school. Immediately, I had 20 offers of jobs in central New York in agriculture. I just told some of my boys the reason I wasn't in Fabius earlier. My youngest brother applied for a job in Fabius School and got in an argument with Mr. Wright and told me about it. I said, well, I guess I don't want to go to Fabius. So I took McLean Central School. That was a big drive for me to drive down there, about 40 miles down to McLean School. A beautiful school, all good farm boys. Can you believe I was back there this last year as an alumni, 57 years ago. 8 boys that I had there were there, all bald-headed, retired farmers. So here I am in McLean. Walter Knapp and George Young drove up, came into my shop. we would like to hire you. I said, why? Well, we're in need of an agriculture teacher in Fabius, and you're driving 40 miles, it's only 10 miles from your house, or they found this out, and we'll give you $1,000 more to come to Fabius. And that's how I got to Fabius. Well, maybe you'd like to know a little bit about, I made a few notes here. Some of the boys that I had here in school that are sitting here can vouch for some of these statements that I made. What changed my life? Well, let's go back 88 years ago. A farm boy on a 20-cow farm, graduating high school in 34. Milk selling for 95 cents a hundred. 1929 to 1934. 1929 was the first ride I had on a bus. We had to get to school after the grade school in a Model T Ford. That was fun in the winter when you couldn't start the thing and we'd be late to school and so on. What kind of a farm did we live on? We lived on a farm without a bathroom. You wouldn't know what an outhouse and a serial catalog was for. Some people could laugh about that. There wasn't such a thing as a radio. Our telephone cost us $1 a month, as long as we didn't make a long distance call. Milk